to another JoyScore podcast. We are here today with a yoga instructor extraordinaire, Karla Tafra, and she is going to engage in some conversation today about nutrition. Last time we were together, we talked about breathing. And in that discussion, my wife, Susan, pointed out that you can live for 3 minutes without breathing. You can live for 3 days without water and 3 weeks without food. So water is pretty simple. You either drink water or you don't.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about food, there is just a whole range of issues embedded in that notion of, what's the right stuff, the right kind of fuel for the engines that we have in our bodies. When I grew up, there were 3 basic food groups that we learned in school. There were vegetables, carbohydrates, and proteins. That was how they characterized them.
Oh, wow.
And today they've expanded that a little bit, and they've added fruit and dairy as sort of subsets. So now there's 5 basic food groups. And every couple of years they reevaluate and decide whether or not there's new ones or old ones. So in thinking about those 5 basic food groups, vegetables, carbohydrates, fruit, dairy, and protein, give us your thoughts on what a good balanced diet might consist of.
So first of all, I would never characterize food and put them in those groups, especially because you were missing the most important one, which is fats. So dairy is not the only ingredient that has fat inside, and there's so many different ingredients and products that contain fat. And I do believe that those foods are really important for your hormones and for your entire metabolism. So when in my head, I divide foods into carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and then micronutrients. So these big macronutrients are then further divided into subcategories. Carbohydrates also are divided into fruit, vegetables, and then we have grains and other starchy vegetables, let's say. So I believe that a good balanced diet has to have all of those big 3 macronutrients plus additional micronutrients that you get from specific foods that have an abundance of them in a small in small quantities. So what would today be called superfoods, let's say. In these big macronutrient groups, I do believe that there are specific foods that are better than others. But if they're all unprocessed and if they're all coming from a sustainable organic source, they will still be better, even if they have a higher glycemic index, even if they are taking a while to process and digest. So whenever we're talking about balanced, I would say that it depends from person to person, because it depends on your age, it depends on the level of activity, it depends on your gender, it depends on where you live, it depends on your tradition, because some people have grown up eating, let's say, rice and beans their entire life, and their bodies are well adapted to digest them. But then you have cultures who don't really have rice and beans in their diets, and if you give it to them, they're going to have issues because they don't have the bacteria in their bodies to successfully digest that food if eaten in large quantities. So when talking about balancing, every person for themselves.
So I agree with you completely on that. Going back to the food groups, those weren't my 5 groups.
Oh yeah, I know.
5 groups that the the Food and Drug Administration recognizes as
I know, and that's why I'm saying it's bad.
Which is deficient in fat, although much of the protein and some of the vegetables and carbohydrates have a fat component in them, and certainly dairy brings some of that to the table. But you threw a couple of words out that I think deserve a little bit more explanation for the viewer who is coming into this wondering, okay, what do I do? I don't know anything about food other than I eat what's on the plate.
And there's
so you talked about unprocessed first. What does that mean?
So today, especially here in the US, a lot of people rely on heavily processed foods, which come from either like a fast food source, or you buy them in the store and they're in the freezer and you just simply heat them up and that's it. So
what does processed mean?
Manufactured food.
So well, no, actually, no.
I want to get a good definition of what processed food means.
So processed means a lot of things, because when you cook food, you also process it. Mm-hmm. You thermically process it. So when I'm talking, the processed word that I'm talking about is the manufactured processed foods. Whereas processed foods that you process at home because you have to cook them because you can't eat everything raw is a different type of process.
Okay.
So, but you can also, have a healthier version of that too, and use healthier oils and healthier rubs and healthier sauces and stuff like that, which you will use to process it. Sure. But when I'm speaking of, let's say, bad processed foods and bad, I don't want to talk about bad and good foods, but yes, I'm talking about manufactured foods, because usually the quality of oils, the quality of ingredients that are put to process that food are largely fake. They are artificial. They are full of fillers. They are full of colorings and full of toxins that shouldn't be there, just to make the food be more appealing and kind of addictive in a way. And it all tastes
How does a person know that all that stuff is in there?
Well, that's the problem. Today people are getting more and more aware because everybody's talking about it, and you can read books and articles and all of that. But when you go to a restaurant or when you go to a fast food chain, you can't really know unless you ask for the ingredient list, and then you see this big list of things that shouldn't be there. But when you're buying food, you can always read it off the label. And that's the thing. People don't really read the labels. There are so many hidden sugars, hidden toxins, hidden colorings in there that people are just not looking at. They're just grabbing the box and putting it in their cart, not even thinking to turn it around and see what's there. Like, for example, today I am making a dish that requires breadcrumbs. And because I don't eat bread, I can't make my own. So I went to the store and I went to search for gluten-free breadcrumbs or for any type of breadcrumbs. And the amount of ingredients on any box for breadcrumbs I cannot even explain it. There's so many ingredients there that shouldn't be there. It should be just bread or gluten-free bread, and that's it. They all have sugars. They all have fillers. They all have weird ingredients that you cannot even pronounce. They're just chemicals, And at the end of the day, people either don't read it or they just don't want to read it. And they just grab whatever they usually use and like. But it's kind of, it's scary when you look at it, because you're putting so many chemicals inside of your body and you don't even know, on a daily basis. So,
last week you talked about a little bit this company called Biome, who they give you your microbiome analysis.
Yeah.
And so there's a project which is on hold now that we are also part of, which is the second layer of JoyScore, which is Biome Score, which is something kind of approaching it in the direction of Biome is, where we have microbiome testing and food recommendations and teach people how food can be a very important part of their life,
Yeah.
And what I learned, because I had done this analysis a couple of years ago, and what I learned from that, good or bad, or right or wrong, was interesting, because a lot of things which I had all along my life thought they were good for me.
Mm-hmm.
But based on this analysis, I found out that they were not good for me because of my DNA, my microbiome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, things like I have a trainer, and she's been training me for 6 years, and she swears that I have to have at least one avocado a day.
Mm-hmm.
So she said that's going to be part of your diet, because that's where you get the good fat.
Yeah.
So my analysis comes out and it says avocados are not good for me. Apple is not good for me. I said, what the hell is this?
Yeah, and the reason for it, is what I said in the beginning. Like, not every ingredient and not every food is going to be good for every person.
Everybody, yeah.
And that is the way it is for a myriad of reasons. One of them is, like I said, cultural. One of them is your microbiome and your bacteria that you've created by eating specific foods. So, for example, that's why we have to eat seasonally. Because when the seasons change, your microbiome changes with the foods you're eating. And if, for example, during winter, you live in a space where there are no fruits that cannot grow here, and you start eating them, your body will not like it, because your bacteria you won't have the bacteria to actually digest them. So you will be eating imported fruits from a different country, and you will not be able to ingest them. And that's why when I mentioned that they also have specific bacteria and viruses that they track that attack the plant itself. So for example, tomatoes, they have a virus that usually attacks them. And if that virus gets into your system, a lot of people don't have the bacteria to fight it. So they might say, oh my God, I don't like tomatoes, or I'm allergic to tomatoes. No, you're not. You just don't have the bacteria to fight the virus that can or doesn't have to be on a tomato. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
So just again to recap for new viewers and people that may not be familiar with the term microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that to mean the array of bacteria that we have in our gut.
Yes, it's a sum.
It basically is designed to help the engine, the body, extract the fuel from the food in the most efficient way.
Yeah.
And a deficiency in the microbiome can manifest itself in a variety of ways, of allergies or the aversion to tomatoes, for example, or if Bhupendra was eating avocados and his microbiome didn't need it, there would probably be some reaction. So in eating a balanced, nutritious diet, can we alter our microbiome?
Oh, absolutely. You can alter your microbiome all the time. And that's what these companies like Biome are actually trying to tell you. They're trying to help you by telling you which foods you should eat more of and which foods you should be avoiding for a specific amount of time to change your microbiome, because the microbes that we have in our bodies can die. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to kill off the bad bacteria and bring in the new ones. And the way to bring in the new ones is either through getting a probiotic supplement and actually by eating foods that are fermented. So those are the best ways to get the new microbes and new bacteria inside of your body. So while you are avoiding specific foods, you should also be importing new stuff that will, replenish your gut flora. And usually that can happen in like 2 or 3 months if you are sticking to the diet.
You're making it a lot more difficult than just stopping a McDonald's drive-through.
Yeah,
I know.
Actually, the first time I talked to Dr. Pimentel, who's a leading scientist and researcher for microbiome at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA. He said that microbiome is perhaps the most complicated, complex human science.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he said, our bodies are extremely intelligent and sensitive in a way that we process food. So it's like if 3 people go out for dinner together and they eat the same food and they literally share from the same group of dishes that you order together, like Chinese food, you have the turning table, you just take
they all get COVID.
Exactly.
He said, first of all, your body is going to process the same food very differently.
Yeah,
because of the microbiome. Number 2, he said that your bodies go through an amazing cultural shock every night, because one day you go out for Italian food, then next day you say, well, honey, what are you going to eat today? Let's go to Mexican food. The next day you go to French food or whatever. You keep changing it, and your body's like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, and the biggest problem is that all of those bacteria and the sum of those bacteria, that is the microbiome, they have like 10 times more genes than we do.
Yeah.
So you can't really, so it's kind of like you can eat what your bacteria wants you to eat. And that is the concept that we didn't know for a lot of years. We just thought, oh, we're just allergic to this, we're just intolerant to that, when you can actually change all of it by, being aware.
This whole project, which I have some researchers involved, Dikshi Gupta is involved with microbiome research and all that. So we came to realize that this thing can go a lot farther than just being able to learn about everything, because the more we got into it, we realized this is far too complex for us to be able to figure it all out, because there's just too much there. So we said, okay, the only way it can work is if all of us have like a QR code or something which distinguishes us from others based on our microbiome study, or microbiome data. So for instance, it becomes part of our universal reality.
Yeah.
So I have a QR code, and if I'm going to be eating a restaurant, I can send that ahead of going there. I say, guys, I'm coming for dinner. Can you please know who I am?
That'd be perfect, I always said that I would love to know when I eat something, how much of it I'm actually taking in.
Yeah.
So let's say when I'm eating carrots, how much vitamin A am I really intaking from that carrot? I would love to know that.
So let me go back to one other thing that you mentioned. We talked about the processed versus unprocessed, and basically I think the definition is if it's manufactured, and Bhupendra offered this definition, if it's manufactured someplace else, that's processed food.
Yeah, that's highly processed.
In a restaurant, you're not necessarily getting processed food, but some of the ingredients may be processed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the other term that you used is one that gets bandied about a lot, and you see it now in every grocery store, and you pay a premium for it, and it's called
superfood?
Organic.
Oh,
no,
organic.
it's not the superfood.
Organic.
It's organic.
Yeah.
And super also is a category now, Braden.
Yeah, well, it is. And the dictionary definition says it's a food that is made without the use of fertilizer, pesticides, or artificial agents.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's a big problem with that.
Of that, and who investigates it, and who determines what ingredients need to be organic.
And there's also a big problem with organic stamps. And the problem is it costs a lot to have that certified stamp on your product.
Yep.
So a lot of little farmers cannot, you know, you just can't afford it.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of local, really good farms that, for example, I know of because I know the farmers and I know what they're using, but they cannot afford a certified seal. So it doesn't mean that their food isn't organic, you know? So yeah, it's a little bit of a problem today because, like with everything else, money, you know, makes the world go round. But yes, so if you do see something that says organic on it, it should mean exactly what you said. Is it always true? It should be, but can we really test it and change it and see? I don't really know.
So the question that follows the understanding of the definition is organic better for you? Is it more nutritious?
Well, in a grand scheme of things, I would still say yes, because it is tested. It does get that seal. And the food that doesn't have the organic stamp on it, I don't really know where it came from. I don't want to even, you know, like you see a shiny apple that looks like it's come from a computer. It has so much wax on it that I think that you can make a candle from it. So I would always go towards organic, but there are some foods that aren't necessarily important to be organic because you're peeling them off, let's say an avocado or an orange, and you're taking off the skin. It doesn't mean you're taking off everything that's been put there. But if you are trying to look for those foods that you need to get organic and those that you don't, there are some that I would say are more important than others if you're trying to save money or something.
Yeah, and I think that in the case of organic versus non-organic, even with those foods that have peels or covers, that sort of protects them from spray.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily protect them from fertilizer.
No, it does not. I'm just saying because...
And the concern is, and it relates back to the microbiome, if you have these other chemicals involved in the growing of whatever it is, they will wind up in your diet and can counteract or overcome the microbiome.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm just saying that because whenever I talk to my clients, they always ask me, you know, because nobody wants to go and shop in Whole Foods and buy everything there. So they're asking me, are there some things that don't necessarily have to be organic? Because I buy a little bag of stuff and it's like $200. It's just too much. So that's why I said it, because
no, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, you can always do better.
There are a lot of articles on the internet about which foods are best to get organic and
I mean, the best thing, honestly, what I always recommend is go to the farmers market, talk to your farmers, meet your farmers, and buy the majority of your foods there, especially when it comes to fruit and vegetable. I don't buy my fruit and vegetable in the store. I always buy it at the farmer's market. That way, you know that it's seasonal, you know that it's local, and it doesn't even matter if it's organic or not, because you know that the farmers might not be able to afford it. So yeah, I would always say, you know, try that first. And if you can't, if you live in an area where that's not accessible to you, then yeah, I would always buy organic. I'm just that type of person who spends all her money on food. So yeah.
One other category that comes up frequently today is GMO, genetically modified
organisms,
produce, and there's a lot of debate in the literature about the extent to which that is a plus or a minus from a nutrition standpoint. Any thoughts on GMO?
Oh, absolutely. So there are a lot of problems with GMO, definitely, because you're trying to play God and you're, you know, modifying food that shouldn't be modified. But there are a lot of problems because they use specific parts of specific foods to combine it with other foods to make them, you know, be able to stay fresh for longer and have a longer shelf life. And for example, there's a very famous situation where in cherry tomatoes, they're adding a gene of a fish.
Oh.
And that's why sometimes when you eat a non-organic cherry tomato and you bite into it, you can have an aftertaste, like a fishy aftertaste.
Wow.
And for example, let's say you're allergic to fish. And I had that situation actually in my school, like 20 years ago. I had a kid who was allergic to fish, and he ate his salad with cherry tomatoes and he almost died.
Oh my God.
Because, and nobody knew why. Nobody could understand it. And the reason was the gene that was in the cherry tomatoes.
Wow.
So that's one of the problems, because they're mixing up a lot of different things and you just don't know how it's going to affect you. And then of course, a lot of GMO stuff is the majority of it is chemically created genes that go inside. So it's stripped off of nutrients. It's stripped off of taste, honestly. If you've ever had a GMO grape or a GMO apple, it doesn't taste like a normal apple or a normal.
Right.
You know, the easiest way to describe it, I found, because we have a chapter on nutrition and we talked about it, closest to its natural form, meaning unmodified, unpasteurized, unprocessed, bacterial introduction, a lot of those things which people and farmers do to make more money out of it, because it's all being done to, like you said, longer life or more product or higher growth and things like that. But it
or
really,
faster, or faster.
It just takes it away from its natural form. So if you go back to say, well, everything should be in its most natural form,
Yeah, and if you're trying to, because the demand for food is ginormous,
right?
And if you're, like for example, every season you can have a specific number of times a specific crop can actually be harvested, and if you want to double that,
then you got to modify it.
You have to modify it. Yeah.
Have you heard about glycophosphate?
Yeah.
So my understanding of it is this is something that's sprayed on a crop right before they harvest, and the plant is going to die after the harvest.
Yeah.
But when you spray it with a glycophosphate, you increase the yield.
Wow.
And so a lot of plants are now being sprayed with that to increase the amount that they get out of the plant. And there are some nasty repercussions that glycophosphate is creating. It's just another one of those sort of buyer beware things about diet. As we learn more about the microbiome and the processes by which our foods are created, it creates more opportunities for us to do bad things to our bodies.
Unfortunately,
just notice your shirt. It says "Just Breathe."
Yeah.
So when you do your breathing videos, you can use that shirt. It's nice.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's big.
One last thing before we wrapped up, you talked a little bit about labels. These things on the back of jars, and this, by the way, is an organic almond butter, but on the back, you've got information about, fats, calories, serving size. There's a bunch of information back here, sodium, sugar, the things that get added to foods, even though the basic ingredients may be one or two. If they're adding sugars, if there's a high sodium content, which means that they're adding salt, if the fat content is the bad fat, not the good fat, even an organic product could be deprived of some of the things that you really need for your body to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's
My
the thing,
my
because people
my
don't,
daughter
read it.
my wife and daughter, when they go shopping, it takes them forever because everything that they buy, they're reading the label to
Yeah.
whether or not there's anything in there that they're allergic to. My wife is gluten intolerant. My daughter has a terrible allergy to corn products.
Oh, wow.
Corn products, if you think about sugars,
Corn syrup.
corn fructose.
Oh yeah, it's the
fructose
worst thing ever. Yeah.
are two of the largest sugar ingredients in most of our foods today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So in wrapping it up here, what would you say to a person who came to you and without a big session said, I need to revamp my diet? What things can I do easily to eat a better diet?
So I'll tell you what I always tell my clients who come for the first time. I first need to look at what you're eating right now. And then what we need to do first is we need to reset your body. And the way to do that is to eliminate everything that might trigger or inflame your body. And once people start figuring out how much they need to get rid of, they become scared because it's like 90% of their food. I actually had, because usually my clients all have issues with hormones. It's 90% it's thyroid because it's just overworked and it doesn't work anymore. And I had a situation where I had a client, she was 50 years old and she was a marathoner. She ran, I think, like 10 marathons and ultra marathons and a lot of things. And she has a lot of issues. She has a lot of pain in her body because of the inflammation. And when I asked her what her diet was, I couldn't believe my ears because she was an athlete. She was eating cereal for breakfast and like the worst type of cereal, the worst. She was having sandwiches for lunch and frozen pizzas for dinner.
Oh,
and I didn't even know where to start with her because in order for her to reset her body, she needs to get rid of all of that. Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, we need to slowly wean you down because if I take everything away, you will have nothing to eat. Yeah. You know, and she's not used to real food that actually has taste. So it's very, you know, it's a shock for your body. It's a shock for your microbiome.
So athletic.
Yeah. So and not knowing, you know.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's
so yeah, I mean, my first thing is that, and then the supplements that they're taking. Okay. So I would always take the most important supplements like omegas, vitamin D, magnesium, vitamin C, and zinc. And I would have them start on that like from the very beginning and slowly, you know, start removing the bad foods from their diet and adding in more good foods, if you want to label them.
So we need one more session on this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure.
And my thinking was because a little bit of what you talked about today
mm-hmm.
is a little too complex for a normal person to comprehend.
Yeah.
And we need some, and I don't know if I can do some of it for you, or you can send me like some written information that we can tabulate for you so we can bring it on screen, talk about it from the stuff that you see on the screen somehow, so that people can relate to it and say, okay, these are the food groups, these are the things you do, you know, because too much. And I don't expect people to make notes, but if they see it on screen, they can maybe go to a
I mean, these topics are very complex, and that's the thing, you know, you can't learn something from listening to it once, and that's why if that was the case, nobody would have any problems. Right. And
Bhupendra, there's a couple of good graphics in the book on nutrition that show the
but they are not following her recipe.
Well, they basically are. Okay. I think that there's not a lot of difference between what Karla's talking about and what's actually in the book.
Okay.
The difference is, I mean, she's adding some specific supplements that's sort of a generalized Band-Aid without knowing whether or not they actually need the supplement.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, there's some of that kind of stuff, but I think we can get much more in detail about
absolutely
maybe breaking down the types, the 5 groups or 6 groups that and getting more specific about what's in there and the good things and the things that are probably less good, because just eating vegetables, you know, potatoes are a vegetable.
Yeah, but they're super starchy.
Corn
and
technically is a vegetable.
Exactly.
I remember a time in the Navy, we had some folks over to dinner and we were going to serve corn on the cob.
Mm-hmm.
And this lady said, you know, we offered her the corn on the cob. She said, no, I'll pass. She said, I grew up in Nebraska and we had hogs and
we fed them with corn.
The hogs with corn.
Yeah.
We didn't eat corn. That was for the hogs.
It's the same with oats, you know?
Yeah. And it put a whole different spin on corn for me for the rest of my life.
Yeah. It's the same with oats, you know, like in the fitness community, oats are like the holy grail for breakfast because they give you energy and fast energy to work out and fill your muscles with glycogen and all that. But the problem is the majority of oats that you get today, especially if you buy it in bulk, is not really good quality.
No.
So, you know, and not everybody should be eating oatmeal every freaking morning. So it's not, you know, but it's fitness, it's fit, you know, so people are still eating it. And I can see that because whenever I have a person who comes to me and she says, oh, I started changing my diet, now I'm eating a little bit better, and I ask what you're eating, she's eating oatmeal for breakfast, chicken and broccoli for lunch, and salmon and rice for dinner. It's the typical bro diet of the fitness world, and it's just not good. It's just not enough, you know.
So anyhow, that we can talk about, you know, more of that kind of stuff at a little bit more granular level the next time, with a focus on making it clear for the layperson that doesn't know anything about nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Like what you just said can make a bit of a help to our audience, where you can break it down in 3 foods, you know, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Mm-hmm.
What are the appropriate types of breakfast, lunch, and dinner that people can try to use?
Well, it depends again on a lot of different things. It depends, you know, like when you eat, do you do intermittent fasting? Do you not? Do you work out in the morning?
No. Those are much higher.
But I think that, you know, that's a really good point, and it needs to be underscored frequently, is that the diet that works for me may not work for you, or may not work for Pedro. So because we're all different, but there are some basic things that we all need.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you think about the car, you know, some cars run better on high test, some work okay on medium, some work on low test.
Yeah.
Well, they all need some basic components in order to run at all, and that's kind of where we are, I think, with diet. So we can go there next week.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds good. So we'll do it again next week. And
all right, looking forward to it.
Okay.
Then you'll be down to 5 weeks.
I know. Don't even get me started. Oh my God, I'm gonna have a baby during the podcast. Come on.
Oh my God.
Well,
in like 5 weeks.
That would be unique.
No, it wouldn't. I need to go to the hospital. No.
Okay.
5 weeks, you said?
Yeah, 6 today. 6. Yeah.
All right. Listen, you guys take care.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Talk to you. Bye.